Are you looking to get rich? Are you looking to take a little bit and make a lot? Well, today on Chasing Millions podcast, we're going to teach you some strategies. I'm Josh.
And I'm the Eric.
Either you're going to trade at a high EBITDA multiple, which is how most companies trade at, or you're going to make some serious cash flow right now and it's not going to be worth anything. I like building businesses that have a high EBITDA multiple.
Make sure that you're looking at your finances in each individual business line. The biggest thing I can tell you is that don't spend money on stupid shit.
They don't care what your banks and people do not care what your business plan is. If they think there's upside to what you're selling or what you're renting or what service you're providing, they're going to invest in you. So let's go over a few strategies. Let's talk about cash flow, right? With no cash flow,
You have nothing.
you have no mojo.
You have no mojo.
So, developing cash flow, right? You got to find your business. You got to find your market you're going to tap into. And then you got to market it where you can actually make some cash flow, right? That's money going in the bank and hopefully more money going in than going out. So,
That's the idea.
yeah. It's called burn rate. How much? There's always going to be a point in time when you're starting a new business where you're burning more cash than you're starting, right? Than you're taking in. So, because you're
Burning
taking
cash
risks.
is fun.
Yeah, burning cash sucks, right?
No.
But we've had a little bit of a different approach. We've always lined up the customer first, and then we figured out, let's go out, buy the trucks and the equipment, etc. And we already have the equipment. That's a little bit tougher of a strategy because you got to do a lot really quickly, right? And you have to have the cash to be able to go buy the goods and the products, right? But looking at how to make real money, and I'm going to give you some sound advice. How to make real money. I've owned a lot of different businesses, from service companies to real estate companies to fuel and lubricant companies, which is a service company. All different types of companies I've owned, right? But here's how I've made money, and here's how I learned from people that's made a lot more money than I have. Figure out how your company will be evaluated, right? Not just what you think it's worth. I hear so many times my company's worth $30 million. What makes it worth $30 million? It's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for, right? You scale it big, only big boys can buy you. You stay small, you might be able to oversell it to some mom and pop guy that doesn't know what he's doing, right? So how I start a business right now, and when I recognize a business I might want to get into, I figure out what do they trade at, right? Either you're gonna trade at a high EBITDA multiple, which is how most companies trade at, or you're going to make some serious cash flow right now and it's not going to be worth anything.
Yep.
Right? So I always work my numbers backwards. I say, okay, is this a business line I want to be in? Is this something I have a skill set I can provide? Is this something a marketplace needs? Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm going all in now. Now, if I am successful, what is my exit strategy? Am I going to just make a pot full of money? Right? AKA a realtor. That's a perfect example. There's nothing really to sell when you quit being a realtor, right? Unless you buy real estate. Yep. So if you decide one day as a realtor, hey, I don't think I want to be a realtor, nobody's going to pay you to stop being a realtor. Last time I checked. In our business lines, we sell our companies off EBITDA, right? People want to buy cash flow. We put systems in place and we put a product and build a brand, and people pay us a multiple of EBITDA, right? The multiple of EBITDA can vary greatly. They can be a 1 times EBITDA or a 20 times EBITDA.
And back up a little bit. So EBITDA is typically, if you're listening, how businesses are evaluated.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't know what EBITDA is, I'm not going to sit here and explain it to you. Go look it up. That's some homework for you tonight. Figure out what EBITDA is, and that's something you need to know. So we've been in dozens of meetings with people evaluating our company, and we've sold companies, and I've sold companies, and they're all service companies, and most of our companies have been valued off EBITDA, right? So figure out how they're valued, and then that will give you an understanding if you have a cash flow business only, and or you have a business that you're building some serious net worth on.
Or both,
right? We have one that does both, right? And then work your numbers backwards. So I'll give you an example. For me, I like building businesses that have a high EBITDA multiple, right? And what's high? What's high in your mind? I would say anything over 5 or 6. So sometimes in that scale, when you scale your business, and we've talked about scaling on this podcast and how to scale and what things you need to scale and blah, blah, blah. But usually the larger business, right? And the more EBITDA dollars you shove down to that bottom line, the high EBITDA number you get, right? So Figure out what your company and your business lines trade at what size you're at now. Okay, my company right now at this size at 1 to 2 million is trading at 2. At 5 to 8 million EBITDA is trading at 5. At 10 to 12 EBITDA, it's trading at 10. Whatever. Figure out when would it be a good exit strategy for you to live the lifestyle you want to live forever. We talk about it all the time, right? We know our company with the business line, we've been offered 8 plus EBITDA, right? We think that we have a little bit more dollars that we can drive to the bottom line and get that 10, that 9 or 10. Yep. That's a game changer. Give you an example. If you do 5 million a year and somebody gives you 2 times and 5 million a year in EBITDA, somebody gives you 2 times EBITDA, your business is valued at $10 million, right? So when we have people coming in here in our office and they sit in these big old fancy chairs with these big old fancy titles and they want to give you 8 times EBITDA, and we think that we can grow this business a little bit more and get 10 times EBITDA, and we're doing 5 to 7 million a year in EBITDA, that's an extra 10 to 14 million dollars in our pocket.
Yeah, it's big money. Big
and
money
if you do that, if you think you can do that in 2 years, that's another 7 million in each one of our pocket.
Yep. And that's all about the exit strategy, like you talked about earlier, right? Is understanding your enter, and if you're one of those kind of guys that you want to know where you're going to be, getting out and moving on to the next thing. Maybe you're not one of those people that can plan and then go, hey, I'm done with this. I'm gonna move on to the next phase of my life, right?
Well, I've had so many business owners that just get into a business because they're passionate about it, but they really don't have an exit.
Yeah.
Baby boomers are the perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
They're shutting down. How many podcasts you see drawn over people saying there's thousands of baby boomers just shutting down their business because there's nothing to sell or they don't have anybody to sell it to?
Yeah. I mean, and that's good for us.
It's good for us if we're in those business lines, right? Or if somebody else is. But slow it down a little bit and figure out what your businesses trade on. And if they don't trade off EBITDA, figure out how they trade and what multiplier. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get tired of doing what you're doing at some point in time, or you're going to be too old and some young whippersnapper is going to come take you out, right?
Yep.
So figure out how they trade and then figure out, okay, is it realistic? Can I get realistically the size I need to get to retire? If you have a market share and you're in a town, I'll give you an example. We have a competitor. He has recognized, luckily for him at an early age, he's never going to get to the point where he wants financially staying in a small town. There's only so many services and goods that you can rent out in a very, very small town.
Yep.
So he's not willing to move. So he's going to sell his company.
Yep.
Right? Unfortunately, it's not worth a lot because it's not a very big company. Right? His market cap is low. So we are going to give him a fair market price, and he's going to have to move on and find a different widget. So figure out what the widget is and how big you want to get it, and then figure out what is the worth of that going to be, because you can leverage that. If you have very specific data of, hey, these companies trade at this banker or private equity firm, and you see that they have upside to it, they're going to invest money in you. It doesn't matter if it's a bank. It doesn't matter if it's a friend. It doesn't matter if it's family. It doesn't matter if it's family office money and or a private equity firm. If they think there's upside to what you're selling or what you're renting or what service you're providing, they're going to invest in you. So how do you do that? You do your market research. It's not that hard, folks. Your exit strategy is a very, 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 very important part of your business. I'm telling you right now, I'm 37 years old. I've sold many of companies, and I've had some very good exits. But every single time I get done with it, I'm like, man, it takes me a few offers to realize what I'm doing wrong. Because smart people with a lot of money, they usually know what they're doing most of the time. That's the reason why they have a lot of money. So yeah. I remember when I owned a container company, I was doing rent-to-owns. Well, every company that was large enough to buy my company did not want anything to do with rent-to-owns. Why? Because they couldn't scale it, and there's a bunch of different rules and regulations across the nation, and these guys were nationwide. So what did I do? I realized that they weren't going to give me a EBITDA multiple on that business line that I liked, that I thought it was worth my time. So the next day, after like the fourth company that's offered me and they didn't give me any value to that business line, I shut it down. It wasn't worth my time.
Yeah, and we've done that together quite a few times, and I'll throw a little something in here, right? You said a lot of different things about financial strategy, but a big one for me is that I utilize the tax code to my benefit as being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? Is if you're not coherent enough to understand that there's a lot of upsides to owning your own business, and a lot of that's tax related. So you can use that tool to your advantage, and if you do that correctly, just gives you that much more upside to being an entrepreneur.
Listen, folks,
And I'm
the
not gonna spend a lot
government
of
is going to
time-
get their money, but that doesn't mean you can't delay it,
That's right.
right? So the government has figured out the magic formula of fucking us entrepreneurs. They're always going to get their money at some point in time, right? But we delay it. It's called depreciation. But when you go sell the asset, you got to recapture it. Tax strategy is a huge game in itself. That's why these things called CPAs are on every other corner, because it's so damn complicated that you have to hire a professional to figure it out for you. But over time, you'll figure out a lot of different strategies that work for your marketplace and your type of business that's going to be beneficial to you. But I will say this, part of getting rich, right? Hence why our name's Chasing Millions. You have to own stuff to have a strategy,
Yeah.
right? If you're a W-2 employee out there and you have nothing to expense or write off, you just pay your taxes and go on down the road. There's nothing wrong with that, folks, but don't expect to be competing with me when I get everything as a write-off. I'm writing off my fuel, right? I'm writing off my car. I'm writing off my home office. I'm writing off some meals and entertainment.
Yeah. And all you're technically doing is you're offsetting your income.
Exactly. That's why you have to have cash flow. That's why we started out with number one. None of this means anything if you don't have enough cash flow to put a value to.
That's right.
Right? We have so many people come to our office and say, man, I have this big idea and I think it's worth this. Well, you know what? We buy people and we buy customers and we buy businesses off cash flow. How much is it making? If I take out a bunch of debt to buy it, can I pay the payment? Right? Because the businesses, previous podcasts, they don't care what your banks and people do not care what your business plan is. Right? They care. Are you be able to, if I invest money in you, are you going to give me some more than I gave you
I
back?
said it earlier. You might as well just wad it up. The old business plan. It don't mean
Yeah.
nothing at all.
It's pretty simple. You have to fucking create cash flow. Cash flow is so important. I hear so many real estate people like, we don't buy properties off cash flow. We buy them off appreciation. Well, you're creating yourself for a death certificate, right? You have to have cash flow because you're going to have mistakes pop up. You're going to have things pop up that you need that cash flow to bail yourself out on, right? Mm-hmm. So figure out, to recap this is cash flow is king. Cash flow is everything, right? If you don't have cash flow, you don't have a business. You can't have employees without cash flow. You can't have an office without a cash flow. You can't have anything without cash flow. There's nothing without cash flow. So get cash flow. Second thing, don't spin your wheels for the next 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, your whole lifetime spinning your wheels thinking that you have this company that's worth $5 million or $300,000 or $10 million or $1 billion when you really don't know. So you have this false number in your head and then reality hits you. Boom! You're 80 or you're 60 or you're 70 and you're tired and your knees are hurting and you think that you got this business that's worth $3 million and then next thing you know, you sit around a bunch of round tables and nobody wants to buy it. Or if they do want to buy it, it's only worth $200,000. Your assets are worth more than what your company is worth, the cash flow it brings in. So don't be that person. Figure out how to create value in your company, and create an exit strategy, and figure out who your target audience is, who you will exit to, and then kind of manipulate that business model to integrate in them. That's how we've made a lot of money. We don't reinvent the wheel, right? No. There's 1,000 companies out there offering portable restrooms and shipping containers and roll-off dumpsters. What makes us different? We create a lot more cash flow because we're a lot more efficient. And Eric's done a very good job of putting some systems in place to gauge that. So people want to know, and there's different levels of this, folks, right? There's different levels of this, right? But most people go out of business because they don't have enough cash flow to overcome some mistakes. I've been there. I've been there a few times where you're like, shit, this mistake was $50,000 and I got $3,000 in the bank. How am I going to pay that? Right? Or I'll give you an example. Eric and I were looking at our year-end financials to clean up some business lines in our stuff, right? Like, what do we need to increase prices at? Where do we think we're competitive? It's a whole psychology thing. And we realized that one of our business lines, we were running single-digit profit margins.
Not good.
You cannot be in business running single-digit profit margins.
Nope.
Your one mistake of going out of business, charge your customers, provide an excellent service, and create this thing called cash flow.
Yeah, and the last little piece of that, before we end this is, in the circumstance you're talking about, if you have a business that has lots of different business lines, make sure that you're looking at your finances in each individual business line, because like if you do not, and you're looking at the overall P&L, and you may make some decent amount of money, but you could have one driver in there that is drawing it down from you're averaging at 20, where it could have averaged at 27, but you got one driver in there that's running at 5%, right? That you aren't paying enough attention because your business lines you don't have your individual P&Ls to understand those business lines in their entirety by themselves, right? Is a very critical piece. And we wouldn't have that luxury, right? If you didn't have somebody that was competent enough to break those up individually.
100%.
So, to Josh's point, and he's talked about a lot of great points here. I'm going to add a couple of my little tidbits in here. Cash flow management, in its earliest incipient stage, the biggest thing I can tell you is that don't spend money on stupid shit. Simple as that, right? You may have to delay your gratification just a little bit.
Yeah, okay? Don't go buy a brand new truck, you rednecks out there, and jack it up.
Come on.
And go drive in your neighborhood and act like you're making millions when you're not even fucking making payroll.
Can't do it, right?
That's not smart. That's stupid, folks.
Next one is business valuation, right? EBITDA is what we know, but just pay attention to if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to sell your business, or maybe you're just planning for that exit that we're going to talk about here in a minute, again, is understand before you sell what things are kind of trading at in your realm of things before you go out and do it, right? Don't just take one person's offer and be good with it. Give yourself enough information, right, to make a good decision.
You only got one life.
Tax strategies. If you are an entrepreneur working for yourself and paying yourself as a W-2, smack yourself on the forehead, please, and then go find your nearest fucking tax accountant and change that shit up. Okay? Don't be stupid.
It's the easier way.
It's the easier way. To Josh's point, he made a great point earlier on the exit strategies, and if you're thinking that way when you're starting your business, you can't put enough thought process into your exit strategy at the very beginning. Know how many years, set your goals. If you can have an end date, you can set your goals at that end date, and then you can work those numbers backwards like Josh was talking about earlier. So I love that, and that's something I would have never, if I wasn't me and you involved with a partner going through a business being, I don't know how far along we really are, because we don't, we have an exit in mind if we can get to that at this point in time. Right, I would never even thought of that. Most people get caught up in the rat wheel of just doing their thing all day, every day, and touching this, touching that, and they never think about. He's like, man, I'm tired of working, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm leaving. I want to get rid of this thing. They never put one iota of thought process into how do I set this up the right way to get the most amount of money out of it
for my time.
But
right? You know what? If you're an entrepreneur like us. Most people, their 401k is their exit.
Yeah.
So to Eric's point, put your time and effort in it.
Yep.
Quit listening to your broke friends.
Yep.
How many broke friends you got?
More than I have wealthy ones. Let's say
how many rich or broke friends that look rich?
Oh, there's a couple of them. I can think off the top of my head. I'm not gonna name any names because people watch this stuff. But
my brokest friends usually give my best advice.
Yeah, for sure. Lastly, and we'll get you out of here, is financial tools, right? Leveraging your software and automation. Look, what I can tell you on this is that if you don't have your finances in order, then it is going to hurt you. And no matter what you are doing, no matter whether you are, just trying to run a business, or if you're trying to exit, or in any shape or form, if you do not have somebody that is coherent and is doing your financials, and what you turn in and what you look at, what you base your decisions on is not accurate, you're fucked from Jump Street. Okay? So make sure your financials are accurate.
Because it's going to give you a good idea if you're making cash flow.
Hello.
Cash flow is everything, folks.
Yep.
So
thank you for your time. Make sure you subscribe. More good business acumen coming.
And quit listening to your broke ass friends.
Quit listening to your broke ass friends.